I was in line at the coffee shop, like every day, on an ordinary morning. The soft hum of the espresso machine, the low murmur of conversations around me, the light filtering through the window. Nothing seemed out of place, and yet something was wrong. I was 58 years old with a lifetime behind me, but as I looked at my reflection in the shop's glass, I realized I no longer recognized myself. The woman I saw there didn't seem to be the same as yesterday, or 10 or 20 years ago. The lines on my face were more pronounced, my hair grayer, but that wasn't it. It was the emptiness. Something had slipped away from me, something I no longer knew where to find. So many times I had put others' needs before my own, children, work, husband, that now, staring at the void of my own reflection, I didn't know who I was anymore, what I wanted, where I fit in this piece of the world that seemed to keep moving without me. Life went on its course, without much change, until the day he appeared. In truth, he didn't appear in a grand way like in the movies. It wasn't a dramatic reunion scene or something romantic that made me believe fate had brought us together. He entered my life in the simplest way possible, like a puzzle piece fitting in without making a sound. I was at the bookstore, looking for a book I no longer cared about, when our eyes met. He wasn't exactly the kind of man I'd imagined falling for. Older, with wrinkles that told stories I didn't know, and a tired look of someone who had already lived enough. But when he smiled, something inside me warmed in a way I couldn't comprehend. It was something simple, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a flame that I knew would grow and consume me. I didn't know if I was ready for it. Or maybe that was exactly what I needed, a bit of fire to warm the emptiness I felt inside. In the days that followed, he began to become a constant yet quiet presence in the corners of my day. He wasn't like any other man who had crossed my path before. He didn't impose himself. He didn't try to convince me of anything. He was simply there, in every conversation we started without meaning to, in every smile we exchanged in the most unexpected moments. It felt like a subtle dance between us, as if we were both trying to get closer, without haste, without too many words. But what touched me most was the tranquility with which he seemed to accept the flaws, the wrinkles, the baggage we carried. I talked about my children, my work, the years that had passed too quickly, and he listened with a profound attention that made me feel, for the first time in a long while, that I was truly seen. It was as if time slowed down whenever we were together, as if everything around us faded, and all that remained was the simplicity of the moment. But at the same time, a silent pain settled in my chest. Time was against us. I knew it. He knew it. Our bodies were no longer in the youth of before. Our lives no longer about long promises of the future. Every moment we spent together seemed charged with the urgency of something that could end sooner than we'd like. And yet, as much as we tried not to think about it, not to talk about it, the clock inside me seemed to tick faster and faster. That morning, as we had coffee in a small cafe, he looked at me with a softness that made me stop breathing for a second. He said, with the calm only those who've lived a lot can have, "I know time isn't our friend, but we still have now. Let's make the most of now." And in that moment, I knew he wasn't just talking about that coffee. He was talking about us, about what remained of our lives, and how being there, in that exact moment together, was already worth more than any promising future I had imagined. Time wouldn't allow us more than this. But somehow, this now was more than I had expected from anyone, and more importantly, it was all I needed. It was that late afternoon, when the sky turned shades of orange and gold, that I realized something inside me had changed forever. We were sitting on a park bench, dry leaves dancing around with the gentle autumn breeze, and I looked at him without haste to speak, not knowing what to say. He, with his quiet calm, gazed at me as if he already knew everything going on inside me, as if he knew I was falling in love with him. And somehow, that didn't scare him. I, on the other hand, felt the weight of what we could no longer ignore. Time. It was against us, always had been. But looking at him, something told me that maybe, just maybe, time wasn't the right measure for what we were living. "I've never loved anyone like I love you," I said without thinking. The words slipped out of me with the naturalness of a truth I didn't yet know how to articulate. But that was already etched in my chest, beating stronger each day. He didn't smile like other men smiled at my declarations. There were no words of gratitude or immediate reciprocity. He simply leaned forward a little, touched my hand, and his eyes, which already seemed to know my soul, shone with something I knew but hadn't dared admit. He felt the same. Love, there, wasn't a fantasy. It wasn't an empty promise. It was the certainty, not that we'd be together forever, but that now, in that moment, we were all the other needed. Time wouldn't allow us more than this. And paradoxically, it was precisely the finitude of what we had that made the love purer, more real. There were no more illusions, no weight of the future. What existed between us was true, complete, and that was all I could ask for. Love didn't need to be eternal to be whole. So as the sunlight faded and silence enveloped us, I made a wordless decision. I would give myself to him. Not because time was favorable or the future promising, but because that now I had, with him, was all I needed. It was enough. The days passed in a rhythm I never knew could exist, fast, yet filled with a rare calm. Every moment with him was as if time, always my enemy, had paused, allowing us to live without the shadows of a distant future. He was there, by my side, and I wanted nothing more. Every meeting, every conversation was a new discovery, as if love were a road that never ran out, always full of surprises, even when you thought you'd seen it all. He talked about his life, what he'd lost, what he still dreamed of, and without realizing it, I shared my own insecurities, my memories, everything time and experience had taught me. It was as if we were finally allowing ourselves to be real, without the masks the world demanded of us. But soon I noticed that, as our connection deepened, the weight of time grew heavier, more present. It wasn't a constant fear, but a shadow, hovering over us, stretching every time we fell silent, when, for a moment, I wondered if I was making the right choice. What happens when you give yourself completely to something, knowing the end is in sight? When there are no promises of tomorrow, no plans for the future, just the now, fragile, intense, and at the same time, fleeting. I found myself with more questions, more silent doubts, each day. And yet looking at him, everything seemed to fall into place. It didn't matter that there weren't more years ahead. What mattered was what we gave each other now. One night, after a simple dinner, he looked at me differently, not with his usual affectionate gaze, but with something deeper, more tender, as if he were trying to read my soul. Then he said, almost in a whisper, "I know time isn't our friend, but I'm here. I don't want anything more than to be with you while I have this chance." And in that moment, all the fear I tried to ignore surged to the surface, like a wave finally breaking on the shore. He knew what was happening. And more than that, he knew we couldn't change what remained. But still, we had each other. That was our truth. There was no more illusion. Time wasn't a curse. It was just reality. And I more than ever knew that what truly mattered was the now. The days grew shorter, not in a physical sense, but in the perception that with each moment we spent together, something was slipping away, as if the sand in the hourglass were running out faster than we could absorb. There was no more time for plans, for thinking of a distant future. and it was exactly that which made each day more precious, and at the same time, more frightening. I knew he felt the same. Sometimes I'd glance at him, trying to understand what lay behind those eyes, what he thought when he was silent, what he felt when he said nothing. He was like a rock, firm and solid, but with a hidden fragility that only revealed itself in the most intimate moments, in small gestures of affection. He was afraid of losing what he'd found in me, and I was afraid that, even if not by our choice, time would take what we were. We went to a park one day, simple as always, but something in the air was different. Maybe the lightness of the afternoon breeze, the smell of wet earth, the wind brushing against the skin, as if we were aware that the moment wasn't just for us, but something the universe granted us for a very short time. We sat together on a bench, close, almost one with the other, when he took my hand and said, "I don't have more time than this, but what I have, I want to spend with you. There's nothing else I want, just you." His words hit me with the force of a truth I knew but feared to accept. I didn't have more time either. Not to wait, not to hesitate, not to protect myself. The pain was a sweet and bitter mix, the pain of knowing everything we had would be fleeting. But in that moment something changed in me. I could no longer fear the end. I could no longer hide from my own emotions. The love we shared didn't need time. It existed now between us, and that was enough. I lifted my face and looked at him, my eyes teary not from sadness but from understanding. I realized, finally, that what made us live and love with such fervor wasn't how much we could do together, but how much we were capable of giving ourselves without reservation. It didn't matter if the end was near. What mattered was what we could do with what we had now. In the days that followed, we did more than just seize the moments. We chose to live every second with the intensity it deserved. There was no more room for fear. The love that blossomed between us was proof that, even without more time, there was still something immense, eternal in what we shared. There was something impossible in all of it, something that defied logic, as if we were, in some way, cheating fate. Every time I saw him, my heart still beat with the same intensity as when we met, perhaps even stronger because we knew we could no longer cling to the idea of a distant tomorrow. But the more we gave ourselves, the closer the fear of the end loomed. It was a silent shadow, sometimes hiding behind a smile or disguised in the comfort of an embrace. But it was always there, quiet and relentless. One late afternoon, he said to me, "What we have is precious. I don't know how much longer I'll carry it with me, but I know that even when this ends, I'll have you inside me, in every piece of time we spent together." I closed my eyes, trying not to let the pain consume me. He was right. Time inevitably would slip away. But what we had, the love we built together, no one could take that from us. That was what I needed to understand. What we needed to understand, it wasn't about the amount of time we'd have, but the quality of what we were living now. In the days that followed, we were braver, more surrendered to what we felt. We didn't talk about the end. There was no need. It was as if, by focusing only on the present, we could make time stretch. Every moment with him was eternity itself, and I felt it with a sharp clarity that hurt, but also gave me a strength I never knew I had. There were no more regrets, no ghosts of what we didn't have. There was only love, intense and immeasurable, and gratitude for the chance fate had given us to live what others might spend a lifetime without knowing. But reality couldn't be ignored forever. Tiredness began to show in his eyes, signs that time was leaving its marks, and the inevitable loomed like a shadow on the horizon. He didn't talk about it, but I saw it in the small changes, in the way he tried to hide the pain starting to tighten. And somehow, that hurt me more than anything else. I didn't know how to deal with the inevitable. I knew what was coming, and at the same time, I knew nothing I did could change it. Still, for a brief moment amid the pain and reality, I realized something more. The love we shared, however short, was enough. It didn't need more time to be validated, didn't need more promises to be true. And in that moment, looking at him, holding his hand with a strength I never knew I had, I knew without a shadow of doubt that what we were living was eternal, not in the time we had, but in the way it transformed everything around us. The final days arrived quietly, as if time had decided at last to be an ally, not an enemy. There was no explosion, no dramatic revelation, but there was stillness, the silent certainty that what we had lived was as real as anything that could last a lifetime. I already knew. The fear of losing what was happening became clearer with every smile, every touch, every word. He knew too. But instead of letting fear consume us, we decided it would be the strength that kept us steady. What mattered was that until the end, we'd be together. The pain began to show in small gestures, something I already feared. He tired more quickly, struggled to breathe, and life seemed to drain from his body little by little. The resilience he always had began to waver, and I saw the man I loved, that man full of life and stories, lose his strength without wanting to admit what we all knew. I could feel it in every breath of his, every furtive glance, every hesitation that took hold, when he could no longer do the simple things he always did with ease. But he, with his usual calm, didn't tell me anything. He didn't want to worry me. He didn't want me to see the end coming. But I saw it, like a shadow growing silent and inevitable. And it was that morning when the sun was high in the sky, but a cold breeze hinted that winter was approaching, that he took my hand with unexpected strength. He looked at me, his eyes shining with a softness that completely disarmed me, and said simply, "I love you, Lavinia, and I never thought I had so much to live for until now. But if anything was missing, it was the certainty that you loved me as I loved you." I couldn't respond right away. The words I had were too small to describe what I felt. But then he smiled, and it was that smile, not perfect but true, that made me realize that perhaps we didn't need anything more. We didn't talk about the end anymore. We didn't talk about the time that was stealing us little by little. From that moment on, what remained of time was lived in the purest intensity. There was no more room for fear, nor for questions. What mattered was that, even if there was an end, what we'd lived together until then would be something nothing could erase. Every second with him, every touch, every laugh became eternal, not by duration, but by the depth with which it was lived. I gave myself completely without reservation, and in that silence full of love, we let ourselves live what remained, with the certainty that, even without more time, our story was already immortal. What remains of love after it's gone? Perhaps what stays aren't the promises made, but the moments we shared, the gestures, the laughs, the comfortable silences that said more than any words could. Lavinia always believed true love was the kind that lasted forever, that molded to life's expectations. But when she surrendered to a love that didn't care about time, she realized that what truly mattered wasn't duration, but depth. After he was gone, Lavinia continued her journey, and though the void was vast, she knew the love she had lived wasn't something time could erase. Every memory that remained, every glance exchanged, every touch given with such intensity, stayed with her, immortal in the heart of someone who surrenders to the moment without fear of the end. Time may steal people, may take what we love most, but the love lived, that never goes away. Because true love isn't about eternity, but about what we do with the little we have. And in the end, Lavinia knew that what she had was enough.